What's happening, everybody? Brian Skeel here, and I've got a really cool tutorial, and we're going to be talking all about drum production for pop tunes. I have a song that I'm currently working on where the artist sent me a rough demo with some drum loops in there. I liked a lot of the sounds, but I felt like rearranging and re-editing and remixing some of those sounds into a brand new arrangement and groove was just gonna make the song way stronger. So we're gonna be talking about every step of that process. If this video is helpful for you, I encourage you to like, comment, and subscribe. I'm gonna be coming up with a lot more content, and I want you to know exactly when it hits YouTube. So let's go ahead and jump into Cubase and get started. Okay, so here we are in Cubase, and we've got a couple different sections going on here. The way that I like to set up my Cubase sessions is my production of the song is going to be the first thing in the session. So when I hit play, that's the thing that we hear. But if I need to refer to the demo at any point, I'm going to have it a little further along in the session. So let's go ahead and jump into that section. And let's just listen to the drums that were handed off to me in the demo. Here we go. Yeah, so there's a lot of awesome sounds in here. These are all splice loops, so we're totally able to rearrange these and resample them and do anything that we want with them. And the drums themselves sound really cool. It's just the groove, I feel, needs to be a lot stronger, so we're gonna take a lot of these sounds and put them into brand new samplers and then rearrange the verse. So the reason I really like these drum sounds is because they have that kind of hybrid lo-fi, vintage, but also a very modern kind of sound. And so what I'm already hearing is I love the way these drums all sound together. And we may need to reinforce them later with our own samples. But first what we need to do is we need to go through and we need to listen to all of these samples, pick out what we like, and then figure out how we're going to manipulate them later. So let's go ahead and start with the kicks. So we've got two very distinct sounds right here. If I zoom in a little bit and make this track a little bit bigger, we've got two samples. We've got this really punchy kick, and then we've got a softer kick directly after it. I like both of those sounds. They both have different characteristics and qualities that I really enjoy, so we will borrow from that. We've also got these vintage snares. Let's check out what these sound like. So we basically have two different sounds in this loop. We've got these shorter kind of samples, and then we've got what sounds like an additional articulation, but the tail is a little bit longer. We hear a little bit of that vinyl crackle in there, and I really enjoy how different those two are, yet also still kind of similar. We've got another snare loop here. Let's listen to it. So I'm not thinking we're gonna use any of this panned kind of stick action, but I really enjoy that rim kind of sound. It's kind of a combination of a rim and a clap, and it's got some really cool character. It's got nice transient information, so we'll definitely pull from that. Let's listen to these hats. So these hats have a really awesome vintage lo-fi kind of quality that I really enjoy, but I feel like we will treat them like 808 type hats and kind of create our own pattern here. We've got another drum loop down here. Let's see what that sounds like. Lot of cool stuff going on there. Got a very vintage crackle vinyl kind of thing. The drums themselves are gonna, I think, be really useful for something like ghost notes. So under that we have another drum loop. Let's go over here and listen to that. That's super gnarly. It's got a bit crush kind of sound. It's got some really interesting character in there that I think we can use for some more just accents here and there. We've got this percussion loop. Let's see what that's doing. That just makes me happy. I really enjoy some of the high sticky action kind of stuff. We have a couple of other loops that don't really show up until later in the song, and I don't think I'm using them a ton, but we've got enough information right now to start building our loop. So here we are at the beginning of our session, and let's go ahead and highlight all the tracks from the demo, and let's just hide them. So here we are, this is the verse, and again, with this song, I decided to start with the drums to create a new feel. Everything was gonna follow this feel between the synths, the guitars, the way that the vocalist is going to attack her parts. That all needed to come after establishing the groove and the feel for the song. So we'll go through these kind of one by one, and we've got these two kicks happening first. I decided for this song, I was really going to lean into the sample tracks in Cubase. So for this punchy kick, what I did was I took that entire drum loop and I just dragged it into the sampler track. And then what happened after that is I zoomed in super close and found where that punchy kick was, and I put my left and right locators on either side of it so that that was the sound that would trigger every time I played a MIDI note. So I can unmute this and I can play this on the keyboard and come up with my parts. I love doing that because that allows me a much more organic way to create these drum parts rather than drawing things in note by note with the mouse. So let's listen to that kick sound by itself. Okay, bare bones here. Let's throw in the small, which again is from the same loop, but if I zoom in, it is from the very beginning here, so it has a completely different sound. And using the sample track means that if I am in one-shot mode, I can control the pitch of this sound with just my keyboard. So if I go low on the keyboard, it's going to have a different sound than when I go high on the keyboard. Very useful. Let's listen to the two of those together. Okay, we're getting somewhere, a little bit of movement, but here's where a lot of the groove is going to be established is with the snare. So we've got this vintage snare kind of thing. And again, this is coming from that snare loop. We divided that into two different parts, the one with the shorter decay and then the one with the longer decay. Let's look at the first one, which is the shorter decay. And then the second snare doesn't come in until that last part of the groove. So let's go ahead and listen to that. Now, what I love about the sampler is this quality drop-down menu. By default, it's set to standard, but you can go into this vintage mode, which is super rad. This emulates a lot of the old school samplers from the 80s and 90s and that really gritty kind of low sample rate kind of sound that is really, really cool. So if I pull up my MIDI here, this is the way the drum sounds just normally. Pretty useful, but if you drop it in pitch, that is where that sample reduction and that bit rate reduction can really come into play with the vintage mode in the sampler. Really gritty, big fan of that sound. Okay, so next we used the rim clap kind of sound, and that was really just reinforcing the snare here. Pretty subtle, but I'm doing quite a few things to the sound. So if we look at our inserts, I've got a EQ, I've got in-phase, S1, and then DBX. Let's go through all of those, and let's just listen to just the rim for a second so we can understand what's going on here. Pretty cool. Let's go ahead and enable the EQ, which is really bumping up that 500 area as well as the 3.5 to 4 range, which kind of makes it snap a little bit. I also wanted it to be kind of wide, so I used this in-phase live plugin from Waves, and what that does is it creates a little bit of a delay between the left and right waveform. So it kind of artificially creates width. Here's what it sounds like with that. I thought that was a bit too extreme, so I grabbed the Waves S1 imager and just narrowed the width a little bit. So it still has a little bit of that slap between the left and right side, which I find very, very cool. Then we compressed the entire thing with the Waves DBX. Very cool. And again, with the entire drum loop so far, here is what we have. Cool. So this was the point where I decided it's going to start really coming alive if I add some of my own samples from my library. So this clap right here, I think this is something I grabbed from the Slate Hip Hop Pack. Let's see what that sounds like by itself. Yeah, pretty cool. I'm using the Pro Q3 to shave off everything beneath about 400 hertz. And then I have the Rev Plate 140 from Arturia to make it really, really carry. So without those, this is what it sounds like. Sounds pretty cool already has a little bit of reverb on it, but I wanted to really accentuate that and give it some width. So that Rev Plate is doing a great job at that. So in context, here is what we have. And it's worth noting that I am throwing the clap into vintage mode as well and really degrading the quality. Now let's check out our hats. Again, this is from that loop. And this is what's really awesome about the sampler in Cubase is if I have a loop, I can drag that loop into the sampler, put it in slice mode. And what Cubase will do is it will find hit points and chop up at each transient. I can very easily program a hat pattern. So that's kind of what I did here. Let's open up the MIDI and see exactly what's going on. Let's solo it. So we've got a little bit of velocity variation between each of these, which is giving it a little bit more character. Every sound in this is a little bit different, which is giving it a little bit more of a human feel. This is also getting a little bit of EQ treatment, so I'm really narrowing the field here, and I'm using the S1 imager to crank down the width and collapse it down to a mono signal. So without those, here's what it sounds like. And then with those. And the reason why I wanted to collapse the width here is because there was nothing useful in the stereo field. There was only that vinyl kind of crackling sound, and I thought that was going to be a little bit distracting, so I pulled everything into the center for that. I like that sound, and I think it gives it a really interesting character, but having that be the only thing that's wide where the hat is really mono really was going to distract in the beat. Okay, so next we have another loop, and it's really doing a very small task here. Let's go ahead and unmute everything and just listen to the lo-fi kit loop. Here's what that sounds like. One more time. Yeah, so not doing a ton of work, but it is providing a little bit of a fill into that second snare. I am doing quite a bit of processing on this. Again, really narrowing the width here, as well as narrowing what's going on with the EQ. That's making it much more focused, and it's making it so that it's more felt than heard. So let's hear all of that in context with everything that we have so far. Yeah, so it's playing a very small role, but it is bringing a little bit of intrigue to our loop. So next is another loop that I just dragged into a new sampler, and again, it came up with these hit points for me. I cranked the entire thing down an octave because I felt that sounded really, really cool. Let's go ahead and listen to that by itself. So yeah, not a ton going on. It's just adding a little bit of sparkle. So let's listen to what we have in its entirety, and I want to show you why I decided to crank this loop down an octave. If I was to put this back at its original octave, it still sounds cool, but there's something really gritty and vintage about having it dropped an entire octave here. Next, we have a tambourine hit, and this I didn't play at the beginning of the video. This sample comes from much later in the song. I really enjoyed its sound, so let's go ahead and listen to it. Now, what's really interesting about this sound is it is also an octave low. This is another way that I can do an octave low. I can set that in the sampler itself, or I can just play it an octave low on the keyboard. So here's what it sounds like originally. Pretty abrasive, but if I bring it down an octave, has a really interesting sound. And that's kind of everything for this section. Let's collapse the sampler And I want to show you a little bit of what's going on in the drum loop group. Let's open our inserts here. We've got a compressor, we've got a vintage tape machine, and then we've got a EQ rolling off everything below about 130. So let's listen to that without and then with. So the Kramer Pi compressor is really just squeezing everything together and making it so that everything's reacting to the kick. We have this virtual tape machine, which is giving it a little bit of that analog kind of sound that I really, really enjoy. It's also taming the top end a little bit. And we have this filter getting rid of everything in the sub. The reason why I like this is because I felt that the kicks we had were a little bit messy down there, and I wanted something more 808-ish to really support everything else that was going on in this loop. So let's jump into our battery. So here is our battery pattern. Let's go ahead and look at it. I've only got a couple of things going on. This C1 is a kick. This E1 is some kind of 808 kind of snare. And then the D1, which is offset a little bit, is a snap. And let's see what happens when we play all that with the drum loop that we currently have. So let's actually take a peek under the hood and see what's going on here. So battery tends to be my go-to if I have a bunch of sounds already in mind that are in my arsenal that I don't have in the demo. For example, this 808 is from a Make Pop Music pack. The snap is also from a Make Pop Music pack. Thanks, Austin, for the cool stuff. And then we have a clap kind of 808 kind of sound, which is very transient heavy that I got from a Cymatics free pack. Then over here, this doesn't happen until later in the song, but we have this really awesome sample from that sound, which I found on Splice. Has like a GoldenEye N64 kind of sound that I really, really enjoy. But again, we have this battery here so that it can reinforce what we have with the drum loop. So let's go ahead and listen to the drum loop without battery, and then we will bring battery back in, and we will see how much it improves the sound of the drum loop we already have with so few moves. Night and day, absolutely. So I wanted to show you the snap. So the snap itself is offset from the snare and the kick. And the reason why I like that is because if you have a group of people that are snapping, some of them are going to start the snap a little bit before the beat. Some of them are going to start after it. It's creating this really awesome flam kind of effect. So I took the snap performance and just backed it up a little bit from the snare, and it created that flam kind of sound that I love so much. Now the last little piece of this beat is a shaker. I just took a regular shaker and I performed it in front of the microphone, and I thought it was going to sound great just all the way through the verse, just and it didn't do exactly what I wanted it, but once I started chopping it up and putting it in various places in the beat, that's when it really started to come alive. So let's solo that as well. Let's add that to the beat and let's see what that does. So one of the first things you might notice is it is panning between the left and right. That's just giving it a little bit more movement and making it a little bit more interesting. But we also have these inserts going on, which is doing the bulk of the shaping of the sound. So let's go ahead and just unsolo everything so we can listen to the shaker by itself and just go through some of these plugins. I'm going to move over here. And so without any processing, just sounds like a shaker, right? But let's go ahead and bring back in Pro Q3, which is getting rid of everything beneath about 1K. And that's just to clean it up a little bit. Then we've got a Double Lock Deluxe from Sound Toys. This is just doing a little bit of parallel compression. We've got it mixed down to about 3. Not doing a ton of heavy lifting. We've also got this gate, which is tightening the sound pretty substantially. Let's see what that does. Before, after. So it really, really tightened up the decay, and I really enjoyed that sound. What that allowed me to do was to put that through a reverb unit. This is Realm from Native Instruments. I really enjoy this, and I just grabbed one of the presets. This is Ghostly Resonance, and I messed with it a little bit, and here's what that sounds like now. Really cool. Then I used Pro Q3 one more time, just to clean up a couple of frequencies and really narrow what's going on here. Yeah, so it's making it a lot more lo-fi. Now I kind of want to show you what's going on my drum bus. I don't have very much at all. I just have a VBC rack from Slate, and all it's doing is providing a little bit of compression. This gray is doing most of the heavy lifting, and it's not really doing a ton. It's just doing about 3 dB of gain reduction. And then I have the red doing a little bit of parallel compression, and that is just, those two together are just tightening everything up. It's making them glued, and it's providing a little bit more character due to the harmonic content of both of these compressors. So let's listen to it before and after. Again, not doing a ton. We're rolling off a little bit of the high pass filter, so it's not really reacting to the kick as heavily as it could. We're only doing a few on the ratio, only 2.5. And again, this is really just tightening everything up and gluing it together. So now what I want to do is I want to play this drum part in context with the rest of the instrumental. So let's go ahead and check that out. And that's how I took a drum sound from a demo and modernized it for a stronger groove in the verse. And that wraps it up for this video. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. If this was helpful for you, please like, comment, and subscribe. I have lots more content coming up, and I don't want you to miss it. If there's something that I missed in this video, or you'd like me to deep dive into another aspect of this song, please let me know in the comments. I do read those, and I want to make sure that I am giving you some really, really cool info that you can use and take on your own productions. We'll see y'all next time. Take care.